Okay, so kicking off on step 7, we're going to go ahead and highlight all of the tracks at once, hold the control button, and expand the Pro channel. Now, there are some things I'd like to clue in on right off the bat. For one, I've got the console emulator already enabled on all of the channels. Now, whenever you opened up your 𝗏 file, this was already baked into the mix as we've been hearing it so far. At any time, you can either remove them, change the model type, the drive adjustments, whatever you would like to do. However, with every mix that I perform, I always have the console emulator enabled on every single track. And it's also notable to mention that on the buses pane, there's also a separate console emulator for the buses as well, as seen here. Console C represents the channel console, and console B represents the bus console. With that being said, that means that everything up until this point has been running through console emulation. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do in order to clean up this mix and get it to a place where it sounds a little more cohesive is I'm going to go ahead and select all of the tracks at once, and I'm going to enable a high pass filter and a low pass filter on every single track. We're going to do a 20 Hz high pass filter, which is typically an area where your ears cannot perceive nor pick up on anyway. This is low-end information that will not be helpful to the rest of the mix. Likewise, this low-pass filter is going to be turned on at 20,000 kHz. This is another area that the ears typically do not perceive, and also over time can add to a shrill effect within the mix and cause it to sound just a little too thin or tinny. I'm going to go ahead and play the track now and enable and disable these so that you can see the difference before and after. Now, as you could hear, there really wasn't too much of a difference, and that's kind of the point that I'm getting at. If that information does exist, and we can't hear it anyway, there's no need to really keep it in the mix to begin with. So just by doing this right off the bat, we're already taking care of some issues that might pop up on other systems, such as PA systems, or even larger hi-fi stereo systems. Okay, now right off the bat, I'm going to start with the drums yet again. So I'm going to solo out the overhead as well as the rooms in order to start from there. So this is where the arranger feature is going to come in handy. I can highlight chorus 1 where I know that the drums have already came in and just let it play chorus 1 only. I'm now going to press Shift L again just to loop this portion so that I don't have to keep coming back to the screen. Okay, now I've got those shaped to sounding just a little bit better. Now, it's imperative to note too that you don't always want to make all of your EQ adjustments while in solo. However, during this portion of the mix process, I usually solo out the tracks just so I can get a good understanding of exactly where the problem areas might be occurring. And in this instance, I heard a little bit of woofiness or some honkiness in the 400 hertz range on the overheads, as well as the 355 hertz range on the room. By removing that on both sides, I can now definitely hear that there is a difference. Now, that would not have been able to have been heard as easily if I was actually listening to the entire mix. And so this is where soloing can actually become beneficial. Now, as we move forward past this point, however, when we get to the full mix as a whole, EQ adjustments will be able to be made based off of the mix as a whole from that standpoint. However, until we get to that point, I have no problem going ahead and soloing each one of these channels and finding those problem areas to cut and some areas where I feel like might be beneficial to boost now. Okay, I'm going to move on to the toms now. Okay, moving on to the snare. So right here, it's also good to mention that by clicking on this portion of the EQ plot, I can hold the control button, click and drag that to the next EQ plot, and all of those changes will be made there. Now that doesn't mean that I have to save those changes, but it's also a good starting point and to help me to move along a little bit quicker. So I'm going to use the same EQ plot on kick 1 that I've used on kick 2, but I'm going to change them up just a little bit based on their sonic features. Okay, so I definitely think that the drums sound a lot better than they did anyway. I'm going to now go ahead and show you what they sounded like before and what they sound like after. So I'm going to collapse all of these Pro channels real quickly here. Select just the drums. Hit the play button. And what I'm going to do is bypass and enable all of the effects from here. So this is before and after. Before and after. Okay, so as you could notice, the drums got a little punchier, a little beefier, and that's what I was going for. So let's move on now to the extra instruments here. And just as before, we're going to go ahead and start with the bass guitar. Okay. Now that we've got the bass guitar added and the kick added, it doesn't appear that the kick and the bass guitar are really competing that much, as you can hear. However, going forward, there are definitely some things that we can use to make that kick come through just a little more, such as sidechain compression. And we'll go ahead and address that at a later time. But for right now, we're going to go ahead and continue on with our EQ adjustments. Now, having the bass in a better relationship with the kick drum and the drums themselves, I'm going to go ahead and move on now to the other lower end instruments so that I can begin to carve out a space for that bass guitar in light of where they stand in the mix as well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and move on now to another portion of the song where I've got more of the instruments playing. So let's go to verse 2 now and begin to loop that. Okay, so during this portion here where I'm mixing these guitars, there's some areas that I have cut that didn't sound so well on this side here, and there's some areas that I cut as well in the same areas. Now, what you'll notice is that I did the control copy of the EQ spectrum. This allows me then to boost areas that I have cut on the left side and to cut areas that I have boosted on the left side as well. This is what's called complementary EQ, where you're carving out a space for something that you know you're going to pan later anyway. So these are going to be panned left and right to begin with. So therefore, by carving out their EQ spectrums completely opposite of another, it actually creates a wider stereo field and a perception of that stereo field. Okay, so now I'm working on the delays that are attached to the lead guitar here. And because they are just delays and they're added effects, I'm going to go ahead and remove a lot more low end from these than I normally would. Okay, so already we're starting to see that the electric elements, the bass elements of the mix, are starting to set together more cohesively. Now we're going to move on to the acoustic guitars, which is really an integral part of this song. And so they have to be treated very carefully in order to make sure that they still set well in the mix and are present and heard, but are not overpowering to the other instruments as well. For this, I'm going to go ahead and loop from verse 1 to chorus 2, just to get a good feel for all of them as a whole. Okay, so now all of the instruments are really beginning to come together. They're all being able to have a little bit of space of their own. They're gaining some clarity, and that's definitely a good thing. There are a couple of instruments, however, that have not came in as of yet that I need to still get a good grasp of, and that is found here on the crescendo and chorus 3. So I'm going to go ahead and loop that section now. and begin mixing those as well. Okay, now I'm going to go from verse 2 to chorus 3 so that I can begin to mix these strings in as well. Okay, so now with most of the elements that are already found their place, you'll notice too that this is still in mono, and so it sounds really good in mono, and that's definitely a good starting point. Now, there are still some level adjustments that need to be made after the fact, because when you're adjusting the EQ, you're literally turning up and turning down frequencies. So this is going to be another thing that we're going to have to go back through and basically get another ref mix now that we have sort of the ballpark with the initial rough mix. It shouldn't be too hard just to adjust minor adjustments on the individual instruments themselves. I do need to still mix these last acoustics here that are found at the end of the song, however, and so I'll do that now. going to go ahead and look at the phase on these two, just to get a little closer view here. Okay. Okay, and we also have these backing vocals that come in just on verse 2. So we're going to go ahead and address those. Notice that we're saving the vocals for last, by the way. Okay, so now that we've got sort of the spaces cleared out for the vocals, let's go ahead and begin to EQ the vocals now to set within the rest of the mix as a whole.
You're so close to giving up. You have to love yourself before anyone else can, and wait for the moment when you least expect it to get swept off of your feet and feel something magical. But you're so used to tragedy, your heart is in tangles, things people do to feel loved. You're so close to giving up. You have to love yourself before anyone else can, and wait for the moment when you least expect it to get swept off of your feet and feel something magical. But you're so used to tragedy, your heart is in tangles, things people do to feel loved. You're so close to giving up. You have to love yourself before anyone else can, and wait for the moment when you least expect it to get swept.
Okay, so now we're going to go ahead to the next step of this, which is step number 8. Now, this is where the big win in the sort of the payoff for all of this is given. We're going to switch the master bus to stereo, and we're going to begin to pan things left, center, and right. I'm also going to switch this now to looping the entire song as a whole.
You've got a sacred heart, but you don't know how to use it. Always letting strangers take it and abuse it. And you're so used to getting hurt now, it doesn't faze you. But you get kicked to the dirt, doesn't it amaze you? The things people do to feel loved, without someone they don't feel good enough. Don't go searching, you're supposed to be found by the right one, but you just want someone new to pick up the pieces of your heart on the ground, but you'll forget all of them when they're through. You have to love yourself before anyone else can, and wait for the moment when you least expect it to get swept off of your feet and feel something magical. They're so used to tragedy, your heart is entangled. The things people do to feel loved, you're so close to giving up. Don't go searching, you're supposed to be found by the right one, but you just want someone new to pick up the pieces of your heart on the ground, but you'll forget all of them when you're there. When you're there, don't go searching. Someday you'll be found, and it'll make sense when nobody else worked out, and they'll pick up the pieces of your heart on the ground, but you'll forget all of them when you're found. You've got a sacred heart, but you don't know how to use it. Always letting strangers take it and abuse it. And you're so used to getting hurt now, it doesn't faze you. But you get kicked to the dirt, doesn't it amaze you? The things people do to feel loved, without someone they don't feel good enough. Don't go searching, you're supposed to be found by the right one, but you just want someone new to pick up the pieces of your heart on the ground, but you'll forget all of them when they're through. You have to love yourself before anyone else can, and wait for the moment when you least expect it to get swept off of your feet and feel something magical. They're so used to tragedy, when nobody else worked out, and they'll pick up the pieces of your heart on the ground, but you'll forget all of them when you're found.
Okay, so as stated before, this is the big payoff. So as you remember, this is how it sounded in mono. And now when we fold it back out to stereo after doing our EQ adjustments,
You've got a sacred heart, but you don't know how to use it. Always letting strangers take it and abuse it. And you're so used to getting hurt now, it doesn't faze you. But you get kicked to the dirt, and doesn't it amaze you? The things people do to feel loved. Without someone, they don't feel good enough. Don't go searching. You're supposed to be found by the right one, but you just want someone new to pick up pieces of your heart, but you'll forget all of them. You have to love yourself before.
okay, so now we have a really good rough mix, a good starting point to actually start building onto. And so now, during the next portion of this, we're going to slowly start adding in desired effects, being mindful of level matching along the way. And this includes creating sends to reverbs, delays, and saturation channels as well.